Greetings and welcome to the first episode of Pride in Our Community, a monthly series dedicated to celebrating and discussing topics related to the LGBTQ community here in Niagara County and in Western New York. I'm Ronald Piaseczny, the president and co-founder of Niagara Pride and one of the co-hosts of this monthly series.
And I'm Sherry Fawcett, the programming chair of Niagara Pride.
Thank you. Every month we will be bringing on a new guest to share information about issues impacting LGBTQ individuals locally and nationally. Pride in Our Community will also serve as a way to share information about services and organizations that are LGBTQ affirming, as well as promote local LGBTQ events and happenings. Niagara Pride is honored to host and co-host a number of Pride events, starting with the unofficial kickoff to Pride in Western New York, our third annual Western New York Pride 5K Fun Run and Walk, as well as the LGBTQ Health and Wellness Fair that's being held on Saturday, May 18th, 2024, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at SUNY Niagara. There will be over 45 informational and artisan vendors with Cheesy Chick food truck there, as well as performances by local drag icon Freddie Mercury. This is a fundraiser for Niagara Pride. We will also be doing pride flag raising ceremonies across Niagara County on May 31st, starting at 9 a.m. at Art Park in Lewiston, followed by flag raising ceremonies at Niagara Falls State Park, Niagara Falls City Hall, North Tonawanda. And then on June 3rd, we'll also be doing flag raising ceremonies at Lockport City Hall.
Once again, I'm Sherry Fawcett, the programming chair for Niagara Pride. I help organize many of our events that are held at Niagara Pride, as well as coordinate our volunteers. I worked for the federal government for over 30 years, and now I'm a retired veteran. Pride in Our Community is brought to you by Niagara Pride, a 501(c) nonprofit organization based in Niagara County, but with our mission to serve the LGBTQ plus individuals and their families throughout Western New York. Although our agency's only incorporated in 2020, we have over 15 years of history. Having started out as a monthly social group, providing safe space for the LGBTQ community people to meet up in Niagara Falls, to now providing services like our sexual wellness programs, Know Your Status, the Gene Hopkins Memorial Scholarship, various grants to middle and high school students, developing the LGBT community affirming programs, as well as DEI trainings that are offered both locally and nationally. On June 2nd, Niagara Pride will be marching in the Buffalo Pride Parade. We invite as many folks as possible interested in marching and representing Niagara County in the march with us that day. Then on June 8th, we will be having Newfane Pride held at Calhoun's Pub in Newfane, New York, from 12 to 3:30. Oliver Street Pride is back and will be on Saturday, June 15th, 2024 at Heritage Park on Oliver Street, North Tonawanda. There will be close to 70 vendors, performances, and food trucks.
And then also, our first annual Lockport Pride Festival will be held right here in Lockport at the Keenan Center on June 22nd, 2024 from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. The festival is free to all and will feature over 35 artisans and informational vendors, performers, as well as a kids zone. Then, from 6 to 7 p.m., Divas Who will be performing a drag show at the Keenan Center Theater. A portion of Lockport Pride will be ticketed, and that will be the drag performance. And then finally, on June 29th, 2024, the second annual Rainbow City Pride Festival is back. Located right on Old Fall Street in downtown Niagara Falls. The festival will feature a number of street performers, various activities for folks of all ages, as well as food vendors, informational and artisan vendors. This is a great celebration for Niagara Falls and an amazing opportunity to check out all the splendor that is Niagara Falls.
Niagara Pride is working with Discovery Niagara Shuttle to provide for transportation to all of our June Pride events. For more information about any and all of our events, as we just mentioned, please go to www.niagarapride.org and/or check us out on Facebook at Niagara Pride, serving all of Western New York.
Thank you, Sherry.
You're welcome.
So now, in this first episode of Pride in Our Community, we want to take an opportunity to focus on LGBTQ youth and speak to some of the issues impacting them, as well as learn about local services that are offered. Here to help us with that, we've invited G. Swords from GLYS. Welcome, G.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Perfect. Thank you for coming today. So we're here to ask you a few questions, and Sherry, would you like to kick us off?
I'd love to. G, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and the work you do at GLYS?
Yeah, awesome. So my name is G. Swords. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the programs manager at GLYS, which is exactly what it sounds like. I oversee all of our youth services, all of our parent, caregiver, and family supports, as well as our in-school programming. I'm actually not originally from Western New York. I'm originally from East Texas, a very small town right on the like Texas-Louisiana border. So growing up, I didn't have access to, as you can imagine, a lot of safe and affirming spaces, and didn't really even have a chance to explore my identity when I was a youth, and I certainly didn't have, adult LGBTQ role models to kind of guide me through some of those formative years. So for me, it's really critical and important to make sure that I am that LGBTQ adult that can be a role model for our youth. I was fortunate enough to move away from Texas and be able to go to school at the University of Arizona in Tucson, which has a very large LGBTQ student population, a great Pride Center and programming. And that was where I really got into a lot of my advocacy work, really started understanding, how important it is to be a self-advocate and learning those skills that I now work with a lot of our youth on.
Okay. And I have another question for you. So the people who aren't aware of GLYS, can you tell us more about the organization and the services that you provide?
Yeah, so GLYS has actually been around for 41 years. We were founded in 1983 as kind of an offshoot of the Mattagine Society, which is a very well-known historical space in the Western New York region. We branched off to the local chapter of what is now PFLAG, as well as Evergreen Health, and then GLYS. Predominantly, we work with LGBTQ youth. Obviously, that is our focus. We service a very wide age range, all the way from 5 up to 21, although a lot of our current programming does focus on that middle and high school range. We have sort of a 3-pillar model to the way that we intervene in our communities, which is our direct youth services, our drop-in center, which has been around since pretty much the inception of the agency. Started out in a church basement, and now we have this beautiful programming space at 741 Main Street in downtown Buffalo. We have a clothing closet, we have a snack pantry, school supplies, hygiene products, just things that make the youth feel really comfortable, basic needs that they can come in and access, as well as, gender-affirming items. And then we have our family and community support programs, which we think is a really critical element to making sure that our youth feel safe and supported. So we have our parent and caregiver support groups. We have a family support coordinator who works one-on-one with a lot of the parents, grandparents, family members of our LGBTQ plus youth, who is a person who has lived experience as both a parent and a member of the LGBTQ plus community. We really value lived experience in a lot of our programming, and the fact that most of our staff are members of the community with different identities is a really, I think, critical part to making sure that we're intervening in a really authentic way. And then we also do our in-school supports, which predominantly is working with our GSAs. So back when I went to high school, they were gay straight alliances, right? Now they're typically known as gender and sexuality alliances, to be a little more inclusive. So what we do, rather than supporting the students directly predominantly is we support the advisors, and we support the folks who are in those leadership roles in schools to make sure that they have the tools that they need to create those safe spaces and allow the youth to take ownership of those student clubs and really make sure that they can take leadership roles in their school and feel empowered to make those changes. So we're in just a little over 100 schools throughout the Western New York
Wow.
area, which has been, such a great thing to watch grow, because when I started at GLYS like 5 years ago, there were absolutely no middle school GSAs. We were in maybe 40 schools, so we have had just an explosion of seeing these student clubs come up in schools, both high school and middle schools.
It's fabulous.
No, that's amazing. I do want to follow up on one point that you said. I don't think a lot of people realize that you provide youth services for individuals as young as, I think you said, 5.
Yes.
That's amazing. Can you just talk maybe a little bit, like what kinds of services for somebody who's like 5, 6, 7 years old? Like what do those services look like?
Yeah, so typically when we're engaging with youth that young, we're engaging with the whole family as a unit. Oftentimes parents will note, that their youth don't have interactions with kids their own age, don't have interactions with maybe adult LGBTQ role models. So having a family event, so we do like an annual summer picnic where we're able to have youth and family members of all ages, able to engage siblings, and just really focusing on creating support for that whole family unit really at that age and giving them the tools that they need. We also focus a lot on making sure that youth of that age have positive and authentic representation. So like a lot of the books that we have at our center and things of that are appropriate, for youth in that age range so that they can see themselves reflected and they have the opportunity to explore their identity so they can find their most authentic self.
Exactly. No, so it definitely sounds like very age appropriate. You guys take that time to really develop what would be meaningful programming for age appropriate youth.
Definitely.
So, no, that's awesome.
That really is.
So I wanted to ask you, going a little bit deeper into some of the national statistics, and I think it ties into what you originally had indicated. Growing up in a part of the country where maybe there weren't a lot of services, or any potentially, I think that's a trend that we tend to see. So what I wanted to ask was, we see statistics that start coming out over the last couple of years from like the Human Rights Campaign. Their 2023 LGBTQ youth survey indicated that 55.1% of the youth that they surveyed screened positive for depression, 63.5% screened positive for anxiety, close to 31% screen positive for psychological distress. And those numbers tend to be higher for transgender youth compared to their heterosexual counterparts. We've also seen the CDC have similar results. So in looking at those kinds of facts and figures that are coming out there, is GLYS seeing similar things here in Western New York?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. I think, myself as well as the folks who, work most directly with our youth on a daily basis, so our youth peer advocate and our youth mentor, are constantly encountering youth who are experiencing, a spectrum of mental health concerns. And for us, it really becomes, an issue of why is this happening? What are we seeing in our communities? Where do we need to sort of intervene, and what types of services do we need to create to start to, combat some of this, because it is such a huge and present issue for our youth.
G, in your opinion, what are some of the reasons for these higher rates of depression and anxiety in the LGBTQ youth compared to non-LGBTQ youth?
Yeah, I think predominantly based on, my experience with our youth directly, as well as, we try to keep as up to date as we can with a lot of the national statistics and studies as well. And GLYS actually did a community needs assessment in 2023 where we surveyed over 200 youth throughout all 8 counties of Western New York, and we saw those trends of bullying, harassment, discrimination, predominantly in school settings, sometimes in more open public and community settings. I was just speaking to a youth a couple of weeks ago who was telling me that they get their backpack pulled off of them on a daily basis. They are called slurs in the hallway. They've been pushed down the stairs at their school.
Oh my gosh.
And I think one of the key components to really understand here is that a lot of these mental health concerns and outcomes are a direct result of the fact that they are experiencing discrimination on a daily basis. And we know that this is compounded for our youth who are also youth of color, who are also youth experiencing disabilities. When you're also LGBTQ+, you have those multiple intersecting identities and you're experiencing discrimination and harassment on multiple parts of yourself. And so that really increases your risk for mental health concerns.
Exactly. And I think we've also seen a little bit of a follow-up to that is we do see that, yes, those rates are higher in LGBTQ youth. Sometimes some studies only focus on LGB students or transgender students are separated out from those studies. But across the board, it does seem like the use of sometimes drug use is a little bit higher, smoking rates are higher, bullying rates are higher. Is that anecdotally, do you think that is happening here in Western New York from the individuals that you've worked with? Do you see that as well?
Yeah, I definitely think a lot of the sort of risk factors for these youth are increased. We work with a lot of youth who struggle with substance use, who are experiencing homelessness, just simply because they are looking for a space to feel included. They are, maybe using substances as a way to self-soothe or a way to self-medicate. And I think a lot of that comes from the feeling of isolation and that feeling of otherness that is created, within our schools and our communities, that we have to really focus on shifting that narrative about LGBTQ youth on a larger scale, because that's the only way we're going to really target a lot of those issues.
Exactly. So sometimes hand in hand when we talk about depression and anxiety in adults, we also tend to talk about depression and anxiety and bring up the topic of suicide when it comes to folks that have those conditions. Trevor Project a couple years ago released a study. It blew my mind when I saw the statistic that every 45 seconds in the United States, an LGBTQ youth between 13 and 24, I believe, attempt suicide. In your thoughts, and again, the line of work that you're doing, how do we tackle that? What does GLYS do that maybe services that help that? And then also what can we do in the community to curb those numbers?
Absolutely. I myself am a survivor of suicidal ideation, and so I bring that lived experience when I work with our youth, and I think that is one small component of a really critical element of what we do at GLYS, but also what we can do as community is speak out. Speak out about our own personal lived experiences and our own personal challenges and struggles, and also the creation of protective factors. So it's not enough to just decrease those risk factors, we have to increase the protective factors. And so one of the statistics that I always talk about that's really stands out for me is that for LGBTQ youth, having just one supportive adult in their life, whether it's a parent, grandparent, cousin, counselor, teacher, whomever it is, reduces their risk of suicide by 42%. Wow. Just that one supportive adult. And so the creation of safe spaces is a big part of what we do at GLYS, both, physical spaces as well as just a sense of community. And I think that's something that we can all promote throughout Western New York. as well as education. You know, we understand that not all folks have the same lived experiences, that some people might identify as LGBTQ+, some people may be allies, some people may be totally unfamiliar with the community. And so providing consistent education to combat a lot of that misinformation about LGBTQ youth is also a really great way to sort of work towards those protective factors.
Exactly.
So true. Another question for you. How do the services provided by GLYS help the LGBTQ plus youth in terms of feeling safe and positively impact them?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, a lot of our core programming that we work with youth on, like our drop-in center right now that happens twice weekly, we're hoping to increase some of that, is about the creation of that safe space so that when they come into the space, it isn't just that they are coming to a physical building to receive services and then they're going home. It's about them having a sense of ownership over the space and feeling empowered to then spread what they are feeling in our safe space within their communities, taking that back to their schools, taking that back to friends. And I think really specifically, you know, not just the creation of safe spaces within, you know, these small pockets of our community, but focusing on larger areas, focusing on schools, focusing on community organizations, and understanding that, you know, leadership and empowerment for these youth is a really critical element of reclaiming that narrative. And so we're not just providing them services, we're also providing them with ways to empower themselves and self-advocate. One of kind of my proudest pieces of programming is our Youth Advisory Board, which we started last year, which is a group of now 7 youth, 14 to 20, who basically get together once a month, and I just kind of sit there to support and give input if I'm asked, but really it's their show, and they plan events, they, you know, take a look at our programming, give feedback on it, tell me about what they're seeing, you know, in their community as far as needs go. And that really makes a huge difference in terms of the way that our services are delivered, because it takes it away from that space of, again, kind of transactional, where a lot of traditional service providers don't give those members an option to be included in part of the program planning, to give feedback, and to really have that sense of ownership over service.
Other issues that are often heard about are acts of bullying, harassment, and violence being committed toward the LGBTQ youth. What are ways we can reduce this in our schools, communities, and even online?
That's a great question. I think in kind of 3 parts to that, right? One thing that we do at GLYS that we've since we started doing a few years ago is our safe space trainings. So providing trainings and education for mostly folks who work in schools, but I would say in the last couple of years, we've really seen a rise in community organizations requesting safe space trainings from us. Everything from, you know, healthcare providers to some of our local like museums and things like that, just really vast array of community spaces outside of even just, you know, direct youth services that want to get that education and want to understand how to support LGBTQ youth. And I think making sure that when we go and engage in education, it's not just a one-stop, you know, kind of like 1 hour training where we're going in and then we're saying, we're giving you this information and then bye. Hope we see you again at some point. It's really creating that relationship so that they feel confident and comfortable and offering that ongoing pathway. So a lot of times when we go in and do trainings in schools, we'll get follow-ups from teachers, from administrators saying, oh, I have, you know, a student who came out to me, and I know you talked about that. What are resources in the community that we can go to? And so it's about establishing the fact of you need education, but you also need to continuously have that ongoing sense of community.
And I think you touched on the word that I wanted to kind of circle back to, because what you just described, to me, these additional agencies that are not your traditional service providers or youth providers that are seeking out these safe space trainings is developing a sense of allyship and building allyship in the community. Can you just talk to that idea a little bit more about what does allyship really look like, and how can individuals and businesses and companies do that?
That's a really awesome question. So we talk a lot about the difference between passive allyship and active allyship. And I think that's really a moment where you have to pause and think about, are my actions and the ways that I am structuring my policies, procedures, that's something when we work with maybe larger organizations or folks in the community that aren't serving youth directly, we're looking for things like, do you have signage up in your establishment? Do you have, access to gender neutral restrooms? Do you have policies and procedures for your employees that reflect, the diversity of the LGBTQ plus community and protection? And so that's the difference between sort of just saying, hey, I'm an ally, I'm going to support this community, and putting into place those protective factors. I also think it's really important to understand when we define an ally isn't just talking about a cisgender and heterosexual person who is an ally to the LGBTQ plus community. An ally is just someone who has a different lived experience than you. So like myself, I wouldn't identify as an Indigenous person, but I am an ally to Indigenous people. I try to make sure that I am continuing my education and support of those communities that have a different lived experience than I do.
So we only have a few minutes left, unfortunately, and I honestly could have this conversation for hours. I think we've only truly touched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to youth and mental health. Is there anything that you would like to let folks know about programs or services or events that GLYS is doing in the next month or two, so that they can come and attend, and where can they find out that information?
Absolutely. So one of our biggest events of the year is our GLYS Prom, which is going to be on May 31st. And so that is a $5 ticketed event for any youth ages 14 to 20. Obviously, if any youth is unable to afford that $5 ticket, we're happy to waive that fee for them. And it's just a really great community event where youth can come and dress however they want, bring whomever they want, and just be their true and authentic selves. We also have a number of just sort of Pride events. We walk in the Pride Parade, typically with our groups of GSA students as well as our GLYS youth. And you'll see us out and about at many of the Niagara Pride events as well in the community.
Awesome.
So come by and say hi. But you can find all of that information on our website, which is just GLYS, GLYSWNY.org. You can also call our main hotline at 716-855-0122.
Awesome.
G, I'd like to thank you for being here today. It was absolutely a pleasure, as always, with speaking with you, and we look forward to for you to come back to our show in the future, if you'd like that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching Niagara Pride's newest community endeavor, Pride in Our Community. For a complete listing of all of our events, programs, and services, as well as ways to donate and volunteer, please go to www.niagarapride.org. We hope to see as many of you at our first Pride event for 2024, the Western New York Pride 5K and LGBTQ Wellness Fair at SUNY Niagara on May 18th, where you will find G and their co-workers at that event, as well as many of our other Pride events this season. Goodbye for now. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next month for our next installment of Pride in Our Community.